Hey, welcome back. So here's a question for you. Do you like writing? Is writing your passion? Well, we all know it's my passion. What you're going to find out is that it is also the passion of our next guest. My name is Vin DeQuino. Her name is Donna Lee Miele. Donna!
Hi.
Hi, welcome. A pleasure to get you here. You are a writing advocate. You're part of a writing group. You've written 3 books. Talk to me a little bit about Donna Miele, the writer.
Well, I, like many writers, I've been writing since I was very small. I reconnected with writing seriously after my children were out of diapers, basically. And I had the opportunity to go to a writing program in Westchester, the Manhattanville College Writing Program, which became an MFA while I was there.
Oh.
So I met a wonderful group of people. And when I came out, or when many of us would talk about leaving the program and how isolated we would feel afterward. And so I did 2 things. One was I started a writer's space in Nanuet, New York.
Oh, wow.
And another was that I connected with a friend of mine who was doing a different writing program, also graduating at the same time. And we formed River River Writers Circle, which is based in Nyack.
River River Writing Circle.
That's
I like that. Now, tell me what that is.
We define ourselves as a literary advocacy nonprofit. We started out very simply just getting together with other writers and writing. Whereas your program that you do at the Mayo Pack Library and so many other wonderful programs in Westchester and around the area focus on helping people revise their work, giving people a place to bring work in progress. We go backwards and we bring prompts to writers so that they can generate first drafts.
So you actually help them write during your session?
Yes.
Yeah, that's many years ago. I started a group called the Peanut Butter and Jelly Writing Academy with young kids. And that's what we did. We brought peanut butter and jelly, when peanut butter was legal, and cookies and milk and juice. And we sat around and we wrote. And then we read some of the work that we wrote in the group. We don't do that in the Mayapack or Mahopack writers group. What we do there is they bring work in, and then they get 6 minutes to read a piece of it, and then the rest of the group says, hey, I like the way you began, or I like the names of the characters, or your characters' names all sound the same, you know. So then they go home and they revise. But the actual writing, I did have a class at Westchester Community College where I did that. I like that. And I like to produce right there and then, right in front. How's that going?
It's wonderful. I mean, from 4 years ago when we used to just meet with one group of people at lunchtime, we now have 3 regular writing circles that meet at 3 different locations and different times in Westchester and Rockland.
How long is the session?
It's about 2 hours.
You see, that's great. I taught for 35 years. The last 5 I was teaching teachers. But during those 30 years, it was frustrating for me as a writer because you're trying to teach writing to children in like a 43-minute period. And by the time you introduce it, by the time you get going, they just about get ready to write and the bell rings.
Yes.
You know, and it's no way to do it because writers need to get in the zone.
Yes.
You know, they need to start writing and then they need to stay at it.
Yes.
And allow the story to come alive. And you just can't do that in that short period.
Yes.
And then you're off to lunch or you're off to math or social studies or whatever. And it's just not enough time. That's why we did the peanut butter and jelly writing.
Well, that's the phase that we're at, is peanut butter and jelly writing.
That's
it works really well.
It's a great phase. And if you bring food, they will come.
Yes, that's the truth.
Yeah, it is the truth. So, So writing. Now, when did you start? How you were very young when you started. Did you have teacher support?
Oh, yes.
Oh, see, you're lucky. I didn't. I didn't really.
Oh.
Most of my teachers didn't write anything except report cards, and they just didn't really understand the art of writing. Nothing against them; they were wonderful people, but they just didn't get writing. You know, and it's just like for years we celebrate football players and basketball players, but never writers. There was never really a writers' forum.
There is more of that now.
Much more.
I think.
Yesterday, I was at Westchester Community College with 350 high school students.
That's fantastic.
From all the schools in the area.
And they were writers?
They were writers, and they were there to learn from writers. So they had editors and journalists and poets, and we got to grab these kids for 70 minutes in a session, and they rotated, and they went to all these different groups, and they had the opportunity to understand that writing needs to be celebrated, and you need to fill the stands for writers the same way you need to fill the stands for a football player.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and give a kid an opportunity to score as a writer.
I like that idea of writing being celebrated
Yeah.
for young people.
Yes. And they need to know that it's something worth celebrating.
Yes.
It's an achievement to
Yeah,
be able to create a book or a story or a poem or a movie.
Yes, yes. And I was fortunate enough to have teachers that weren't preoccupied with molding my writing,
Yeah.
but basically in letting me write.
And the other side of, oh, that's a great story, A. Oh, that's almost a good story, B. Oh, that's pretty average, C.
Yes,
And that's all you got.
that's true.
And
That's
it
true.
wasn't enough.
No, and I think for young people now there are more kind of serious writing programs where they
Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
you know, get into friendly competition with other writers and
And-
feel like they're part of a conversation, as we were saying
And
before.
there's something that we didn't have as kids. The internet. Oh my God. You could go and young kids can publish
Yes,
on the internet.
Yes.
And young writers and new writers. And you can see more, you know, we had the classics, you know, and as an English teacher, I had to teach the curriculum.
Yes.
And there were a number of writers. I mean, Robert Frost was in every house, you know, and not that Robert Frost wasn't wonderful, because he is wonderful, and his work is wonderful, but he's not the only writer.
yes,
And kids need to be exposed to all different kinds.
Yes.
Well, the internet, you could sit on the internet for 18 hours straight and never read the same poem twice.
and you have a better chance of finding a voice that
Finding your
resonates
voice.
with you. Yes,
That's exactly right. And that's what children have to do. You know, when children say, I want to be a writer, I say, that's like saying, I want to be a cook. What does that mean? Do you
or an
wanna-
NBA star or
Yeah.
whatever.
Do you want to cook in a restaurant? Do you want to cook in a hot dog truck? Do you want to be a gourmet cook? There's so many different kinds of cooks and chefs. Well, writing's the same way. When you say to me, I want to be a writer, what are you saying? You want to be a poet? You want to be a novelist? You want to be a short story writer? Do you want to be a journalist? You want to be I mean, there's so many different kinds of writing.
Yes,
And you need to find that little niche that belongs to you.
yes,
And that means you need to write.
yes.
And
the first step.
43 minutes ain't gonna do it.
Right.
You know? So it's very difficult for an English teacher, even one whose passion is writing, to instill that passion in writers. So, when did your first book get born?
My first book, well, my publications all began with online journals.
Okay.
And I really advocate sending your work out to online journals if you're interested in publication,
Great.
because there's
Can you
just
think
so
of any
many of
offhand?
them.
Is there something?
Oh, I mean, River has
Okay.
an online journal that, you know,
wonderful.
we have 2 submission periods a year. We publish fiction, poetry, and nonfiction.
Wow. So people don't have to be in your group.
No.
They can, from the outside, submit work to you.
That's right.
Good. So this book, Write,
Yes.
tell me about it.
So our first circle of writers that used to meet at lunchtime really wanted to put together a book. And this anthology represents their passion for putting together something, putting it out into the world.
Yeah. There's something about seeing it in print.
Yes.
And seeing your name at the top of it,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
For many writers, that's a dream.
Yeah. So we, got funding to do a work. We had them do a workshop so that they would really understand what it is to revise and produce something publishable. And we put together this anthology for them, and it's available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. So they're very proud of that.
Yeah, so, it's out there.
Yeah. Now, this was one of my first online publications in a journal called Atticus Review. And it is based upon my family's history in the Philippines.
Oh, wow.
I had written some of this for a group that really wanted to know more about World War II in the Philippines and didn't know American history in the Philippines. So this was one of the stories that got born out of that workshop and out of that conversation. And these journals, after they've had them online for 6 months, they leave them on there, but you now get the right to do whatever you want with the work.
That's great.
And I put this together for a library show. And
so by publishing in here, you're not giving away your rights.
Oh, no, not at all. This is my book. And the last book that I did was also an online publication. This was a Pushcart nominee called Where Love Takes Us.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's
Did
a
you read
journey
that?
in itself. Yeah, I did.
So rather
this is
than...
copy. This is what got you here.
Oh, okay.
Someone gave this to me and said, hey, give this a look and let me know if you want this writer on your show.
Oh, well, thank you.
And it only took a few pages to say, get her.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So this, rather than being historical fiction, is family fiction. And, family and grief, both of which appear in here, are strong themes in what I write all of the time.
Now, you write fiction, nonfiction.
Yes.
So you take a real thing and you run with it.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's what... I've told this story, especially on the show, at least 150 times, about the little boy who came to me and said, Mr. DeQuino, how do I write an exciting book if my life is boring? And I said, look, don't write about the what is. Write about the what if. So take the what is and run with it. Change names, change the incidents, not exactly the way it really happened, but it comes from a real situation or a real person. And that's how stories grow, and that's how stories flesh out. So that's one way of doing it. Talk to me a little bit about the first time you wrote, the first time you saw your name in print.
Oh, as an adult?
Yeah.
Well, it was fantastic. This was another online journal called Mendacity Review.
Okay.
And
Mendacity
by the
Review.
Where Love Takes Us, by the way, just to be clear, this was in Red Fez. I want to promote all these online journals because
do that, because our writers are always looking for places to be heard.
Yeah, there's so many markets right now.
You can be published. That's what I was saying. When I first started writing, there was really not too many opportunities. We were stuck with what I call the gatekeepers.
Yes.
And the gatekeepers said, publishable, not publishable, publishable, not publishable. And unfortunately, many of those were just by coincidence, the same religion,
Yes.
the same gender,
Yes.
the same, and they chose the people they chose.
Yes.
And wonderful writers never got in the gate. And fortunately, the world began to change, and the Judy Blooms of the world, and Holden Caulfield, Salinger, who creates a character that oh my God, nobody wanted their kid to grow up to be. And every kid wanted to meet him, because he was not the everyday kid.
And he represented a kind of pathos that
Yes,
like all
yes.
kids go
He
through.
represented a more realistic view of what growing up really is.
Yes, yes.
And we suddenly found out. It wasn't until I got to college that I was introduced to black literature.
Yes.
And I said, holy cow, you can do this? And I saw wonderful writing, just great. Richard Wright, and
Yes.
James Baldwin, and some of these wonderful, wonderful writers.
And a little bit later, we had Alice Walker.
Yes.
And
yes.
Toni
And
Morrison,
Maya,
who's one of my homegirls.
Maya Angelou, and,
Yes.
and some of these wonderful, wonderful writers who showed us another side of life that was closer to ours, and we began to realize that life was more than fairy tales. And even some of the fairy tales are scary stories.
They are.
People die, grandma gets eaten by a wolf,
Yes.
the three little pigs, their lives are being threatened. Some of these were pretty scary stories. But literature is so much more, and we have to find in us our passion. Who are we as writers? And so the big question, Donna Lee Miele, is who are you as a writer?
Oh gosh. Well, I do write. The first publication that we started talking about that I had in that journal called Mendacity Review was also about grief and about family.
Yeah.
And I think there is something about loss of a family member that to me really shines a light on the importance of family relationships and how very subtly we can love each other. I believe that's kind of where I gravitate toward as a writer, whether I'm writing historical fiction or contemporary fiction or kind of mythical twists on fairy tales, which I like to do. And I even wrote a sci-fi story recently.
Really?
We'll see what happens with that.
Uh-oh.
But it's the same themes.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
That's the thing. I mean, some writers have basic themes. I do. Bullying is one. Death is certainly one. Death shows up in all of my work. This one in particular, Mary Loved Daisies, actually came from a real situation where I had a little girl named Mary as a student. It was my first loss as a teacher.
I'm sorry.
And it blew me away. Mary was in my class in 6th grade. By the time she got to 8th grade, a boiler malfunctioned and she was killed in her house.
Terrible, tragic.
I was the wrestling coach. I took my wrestling experience and I stole, in my mind, a fictional wrestler and made him Mary's neighbor and first boyfriend. And Mary was his loss. And it devastated him. So I had to be able to help my readers to understand what death means. Unfortunately, it's forever. But how do you deal with it? How do you go through all the stages of grief? So writing then becomes very therapeutical. When I took my master's, my thesis was on bibliotherapy. And I very much consider myself a bibliotherapist. I use literature to help people help themselves. And through learning about my characters, they get to know who they are.
Yes.
So I understand my themes. The other very big theme with me is being a special kind of normal. Well, anybody who knows me knows that I'm not exactly normal. I'm a special kind of normal. I'm different than a lot of other people, and I do things that a lot of people don't do, and I approach things differently. And I'm always amazed at people's passions and the themes that run their lives, which is why I do this show. That's what this show is about. So, Donna Miele's passions.
Oh, well, you mean,
What are the things that people need to understand that you have embraced? Besides writing, well, actually, writing is one of them.
yes. I believe that people should. My husband and I started a co-working space in Nanuet,
Okay.
and my colleague Anupama Amaran and I started River Writers Circle.
Let's take that a little slower so we do a shout out for.
Sure, Anu, for my colleague Anupama Amaran and I. She's a poet,
Okay.
and but both of those enterprises I pursued with other people because I feel that people work better in fellowship with each other.
Nice.
I feel that if you want to write, you will do better to commune with other writers about what you're serious
Oh,
about.
yes.
If you are a freelancer or for whatever reason not working in the normal corporate world, you will do better to reach out and be in a space where other like-minded people are working on serious projects.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so
That's why I do writer circles. And a writer circle is different from your circle of friends. Sometimes you
Yes.
have wonderful friends, but hey, they don't think like you do. When I was growing up, I used to jump on rooftops, and we used to raid tomato gardens and hang around on street corners. And those kids never read a book or wrote a book, but they were wonderful.
and that's fine.
They're friends for life,
Right.
but they were not my writing friends.
Yes.
And sometimes you need friends who have like passions.
And who will take you seriously.
Yes.
In
and
what
there's
you're doing.
nothing wrong with having a coffee buddy and a writing buddy. And they don't necessarily have to be the same person. And you have to find people who understand your passion.
Yes.
And that's why I always encourage writing circles. There's libraries all over, New York State especially, that have writing circles. And some people don't even know they exist. There's also, as you've said beautifully, writing circles online.
Yes.
You could go into blogs.
Yes.
And you could talk to other writers all day long. You never even have to get out of your chair to do it. It's so amazing. I never had that. Took me forever. I'm still not technology minded. It's going to take me forever. I hate having a smartphone that's smarter than me, but it is.
Yes.
And I'll never get used to going into my living room and saying, Alexa, what's the temperature? And getting an answer.
Oh, do you do that?
Oh yeah, I do that, and it scares me half to death. Because, I even say thank you, and she says you're welcome. That scares
That's
me.
creepy.
That is creepy.
I haven't gone there yet.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's a whole new world. So, writing, being who you are, understanding who you are through writing, all very, very important things. Just tell me for a second, this anthology, right?
Yes.
Any particular thing in that book that you say, hey, you've got to know this?
This anthology, I would say that it needs to be taken as a whole.
Good. Okay.
What the best thing to get out of it is that these are writers who came together in conversation not only about writing, but through their writing. I think it comes through in the collection. One poet in here that I think you'd want to watch, there's a couple poets in here to watch out for. One is Zasha. She doesn't use a last name.
Okay.
Another is Juan Pablo Mobili, and
Okay.
he has 2 poems at the end. But really,
They're all good.
they're lovely, taken in conversation with each other.
I hear you. Okay. So I'm going to ask the cameraman to focus on me for a second. And listen to this. Readers are leaders. Writers are fighters. Fighting for the right to be heard. Donna Lee Miele is one of those people fighting for the right to be heard. You need to be another. Donna, now you can put it on both of us. And Donna, talk to this audience
Yes.
and tell them what they need to know.
I would say I'm really pleased to have been elevated to the status of a superhero. Thank you.
You are a superhero today for sure.
And to be taken seriously as a writer, it doesn't mean to appear on a television interview. It means to get together with people in your community who are serious about the same things that you are. And they're out there. They're out there, and there are ways to find them.
They're out there. So, my dear audience, understand this. Today, you have been one-to-one with Donna Miele. Now you need to be one-on-one with yourself. You need to understand that writing is a vehicle to your soul. Donna, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being